Welcome back to Community Kind. My name's Alicia Curtis. If you've ever made a donation and found yourself wondering, does my money actually really make a difference? And how are these decisions really made? You're definitely not alone. It's really the number one question that we get. Today, we're pulling back the curtains on the grants process. And I'm joined by our grants chair, Kristy Rodwell. Now, by day, Kristy is the senior expert in grants development at Lotterywest, so she knows exactly what best practice looks like. But for us, as our grants chair, she's the one who ensures that our dollars that our members contribute work as hard as they possibly can. We're talking about the process that has turned our donations of $1.69 million into real-world change, with 100% of those donations going through to our grant recipients. We cover how our members have a vote and why trusting the collective voice of our community is at the heart of everything that we do. Kristy, I'm so glad to have you here to walk us through how the magic really happens.
Thanks, Alicia. Great to be here.
Now, just before we get into our grants process, let me just, talk a little bit about yourself and your background. You have a master's in Social Investment and Philanthropy. It's not a degree that many people know about. So how did you end up studying this?
So I was actually working in Melbourne at the time, and I had been much more in the commercial space, working for a property fund manager. So we were looking at commercial properties and making investors even more wealthy. And for me, that wasn't really ticking the box for that sense of intrinsic reward and putting my talents and my time day in, day out, I thought, to best practice or to a purpose that aligned with my values. So I was fortunate enough that it was a relatively new course that was being offered in Melbourne, and I applied and was successful in getting accepted into that course and being able to start studying while still working in the financial sector. But I actually quite quickly decided that I needed to be all in with my studies, and so also changed jobs, changed sectors, and took a role in a not-for-profit. So by the time I was deep into that study, I was both working in the not-for-profit sector and studying social investment.
So now you work at Lotterywest, one of the biggest grant makers in the country, as a senior grants development officer. So grant making is what you do professionally as well as your volunteer work, but how do they intersect?
I think it comes back to values and principles. I have been volunteering since primary school. I remember probably very clearly one of my first volunteering experiences was doing the St. Vincent de Paul door knock with my dad. But it's a principle and a value that I was brought up with. It's something that I have done all of my life. It's something that I now instill and try and instill in my boys. So it's about bringing your privilege in society, but your talents and your expertise and your experience to that volunteering sector and giving back so that, yes, you get that buzz in terms of intrinsic reward. And you know what? It's actually researched and proven that you actually sleep better at night knowing that you're actually giving back and helping a community and helping someone that might be doing it a bit tougher than what you are.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think people often think that volunteering can be that thing that is the extra thing on the list, but they don't realize that it just gives you so much energy in return, the people, the connections, the purpose behind what we do.
For sure.
So let me talk about how you came to 100 Women. When we first sent out that Facebook message asking for a team to come together with all the different things. We had a shopping list of all the different skills that we needed in our initial team. What was it about that message that, clicked for you? What drove you to be involved?
Well, it's actually a little bit of a funny story because it was actually one of my friends that I'd studied with doing the Masters in Social Investment in Melbourne who actually saw the post first. V saw the post and messaged me and said, "Hey, Kristy, I've seen this post about this new giving circle that's trying to get started in Perth. It's going to be right up your alley." So That's how I first saw it. And, in terms of talking about energy and a collective and a community, I'd only been in Perth not quite a year at that point. So it had been a really busy time in terms of settling into a new city and a new job. And I had to fly back to Melbourne numerous times to actually finish my degree. I felt as though it was time that I got serious about my volunteering commitments in Perth. And so I had been looking around a little bit to see what was available and what was going to be aligned with my passions, my interests, and my expertise. And so I went along really with an open mind around, what's this about? Who are these people? What are they trying to do? And, meeting yourself and Megan and others that were around the table that night, you could see that there was that passion and that real desire to bring something to fruition. It was also no doubt an ambitious program in a relatively short period of time. And I kind of thought, okay, this is going to be a challenge, but you know what? I'm up for the challenge. And I think you can kind of get a sense for people's conviction and seriousness and dedication to the cause. And that was certainly evident in those first meetings.
Yeah, I mean, it really was at the start of the wave of collective giving in Australia. How much were you aware of the collective giving model at that stage?
Look, I was, and I think with the study and with the people that I had been connected with through studying in Melbourne and just making those connections across the country, I was aware of James Boyd and the collective giving via Impact 100
yes.
model that was starting here in Australia and had started very successfully with Impact 100 Western Australia as one of the first, closely followed, I think, with Impact 100 Melbourne. So yes, I was aware of the model and I thought it was a great model in itself, very long established in America, but I still thought that it had the principles and the right philosophy to be able to work in Australia, knowing that Australians are very generous. They're a very generous community, and I thought there was a lot of potential.
It's so funny because when I look back and sort of had this, initial idea of everybody sort of putting in an amount into the fund to give away, I didn't know the research or, the models behind it. And so it was really interesting for me to then realize, so there's this model that is, a new way of giving, which is a slight change on, how we know or think about philanthropy, which is often, a very wealthy person, giving, some money away in a really considered manner, that you could do it in a way where you could actually engage a whole community in the giving. You've been a key part in shaping our grant-making process with 100 Women. What's it been like to see that evolve over the last 13 years?
I think I'm a practical person or a doer. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why yourself and me, but others have really worked well over the period of time. We've had people with ambition and the goals and the great ideas, and then we've brought people with that expertise and that practical know-how to get in and get it done. And I guess I don't necessarily sit back and spend much time thinking about where we've been or even where we're going next. I'm really focused on what are we up to now and what needs to happen next. Overwhelmingly, I would never have envisaged where we've gotten to, I don't think. It's been a wonderful journey of looking at collective giving and 100 Women's particular focus with our community and with our grant recipients, and being able to grow that model and educate a community about gendered giving and giving to women. And also, as you said before, breaking down the perception that philanthropy is only available to very successful individuals or families that have been very successful or passed wealth down to generations. And I think sometimes that actually is as equally satisfying as seeing the recipients achieve their outcomes with a grant, because when you're actually educating people and bringing people into a philanthropic mindset early in their careers, and we do that, making it really accessible to join the giving circle, you've got people early on in their careers who are starting to give. And so then you think about their giving over their lifetime, it's all cumulative and it really adds up, and it's changing a mindset, and it's helping to, I think, also instill that sense of giving back in the younger generations as well, which I think is really pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that stands out for me over that journey is, you know, from that first Facebook post to, you know, even today, is that you share the concept of what we're doing and it just resonates. People get it really quickly and they want to get involved. It's, you know, it doesn't take much for people to get involved, so they step up. And, you know, I remember from that Facebook post, people wanting to sign up straight away as members. And to this day, we still have people who, you know, hear what we do. And now we've got 13 years of experience in, you know, being able to have those grants go out. And as you say, see those grant recipients go through the journey. So now it's even more of an easier sell to get people involved. So as part of a new organisation, we've really had to build the whole grants infrastructure so that, you know, people don't necessarily realise what sits behind that. That's, you know, grant guidelines, it's assessment frameworks, it's the assessment and application process, it's the due diligence, it's, you know, engaging volunteers in each of those processes. When you think about how you assess an organisation and working out who deserves the grant, what do you look for in organisations and their projects?
Sure. The formal study in the Masters in Social Investment and Philanthropy obviously provided a really great base for my learning and my knowledge that I bring to 100 Women. But you know what? I was working on, so the actual master's students at Swinburne in Melbourne put money into a fund that we were then distributing. The organisation, the corporate organisation that I was working at in Melbourne had a fund as well. And I was a staff representative on that giving board as well. So I have seen the practical implementation of numerous giving programs, and then obviously Lotterywest is definitely the largest grant maker in Australia and has numerous systems, processes and strategies that are certainly best practice. So I bring all of that collective learning to what we're doing at 100 Women. And I would say that, you know, what we're doing at 100 Women is at a higher level what all grant makers are actually looking for in a great project and a proposal that's worthy of investment. And that is that you've got a clearly defined project, an opportunity or a need, and you've consulted with the beneficiary group. They understand what it is that you're bringing to the table, and it's a collaboration in terms of how to step into that opportunity or how to step into that solution. You know, there's stakeholders, there's the beneficiaries, but there's other community stakeholders, and that collectively you've got a well-designed plan, you've got your outcomes, your measures of change all identified, and you're ready to execute. You've got the resources that are needed, be that money, people, time, assets, infrastructure to actually execute that project. So we do get to take somewhat of a risk, I guess, at 100 Women. We can invest in a pilot or a study that hasn't been fully implemented or developed before. But even in those pilot proposals, we're still looking to understand, where's this idea come from? Who's had input into this idea, and what is your evidence or your experience that tells you that this has got a very strong percentage or strong chance of working and is not just, you know, an exercise that might not go anywhere. And as a grant maker too, I think it's really important, again, regardless of it being for 100 Women or anyone else, grant making is inherently one-off. There's very few grant makers that provide recurring funding or funding over multiple years. So grant makers are looking for the sustainability in their investment. So if we provide this grant, what are you doing with respect to being able to evidence the results and evidence the outcomes to then pitch to other funders, especially around government funders? Or what are you doing in terms of fee-for-service model in your own organisation? Or even just then in the learnings and the lessons or the outputs from that project, how are you sharing that with your community, with others that are working in the sector, with others that are also maybe working in that cause as well? That's important too with respect to making sure that the outcomes or the benefit of that investment doesn't end as soon as the project ends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to sort of see where it sits in the sort of the life cycle of that project's life and the impact that you want. And, some organizations, I suppose, come to us that are very experienced and established in in their organizational life but want to try something different or new, or they understand that they're not seeing it through a gender lens and they can, pitch an idea that supports that. And then others, as you say, are very new. They're trying out very new, ideas, they're new organizations, but there's something around their experience. The volunteers, the staff are coming together with an idea after much sort of feedback, after research, and they can see something. And it's really wonderful. We're going to get into a little bit more about that. It's wonderful to see those organizations, and, we get to interview them as part of this podcast too, which is beautiful. It's part of what we want to do, is really highlight the great work of these organizations. So coming back to our grants process, we've got a grants committee that comes together each year, and this is made up of our members. So you can be involved as much or as little in our organisation as you like. But as a member, you do have the opportunity to put your name forward to be part of the grants committee. And people rave about the experience of being on the grants committee because it just opens their eyes to the number of organisations that are doing amazing things in our community and how they put forward those project ideas, as you say. And, they get to be part of that review process, which is such a unique opportunity. And I suppose over the last 13 years of our organisation, we've had probably over maybe 1,500 different expressions of interest. I know that just this last weekend past, you've just been reviewing the current year's expressions of interest. At that point in time, can you just share what does that process look like in the room? What are the conversations like?
Sure. So at the expression of interest review, that's when we've closed the grant round. The round might have been open for 5 or 6 weeks, and we're having organisations just fill in a pretty short online proposal to tell us about their organisation, who they're working with, what their idea is. And unfortunately, when we start with 160 odd expressions of interest and only end up awarding 4 or 5 grants, a number of organisations miss out. It's just unfortunately a numbers game, and that's how it is. So in that early first review, we're always looking for alignment with eligibility, with our granting guidelines and our criteria, and making sure that the applications are meeting those minimum requirements. And after that, we're basically looking to then move those expressions of interest onto that volunteer committee, and the volunteer committee are doing an assessment of those against a scoring matrix. So they get to read through the expressions of interest in detail, understand the project, check up on the organisation's website, and really just get clarity on who the organisation is and what the proposal's about. But they do have to score the allocation of EOIs that they're given. So we're starting to look for those proposals that are really clear, really well articulated about the beneficiary group, the stakeholders, the community they're working with, and what those outcomes are, and how those, the foundations, that experience and that expertise to provide some level of assurance about those outcomes being achieved. So volunteers working to their strengths and their expertise and experience is really important. So we've got some people who are very experienced in overseas aid, so they always get the overseas aid expressions of interest to have a look at. We've got people who work professionally in IT, so if there's any projects involved in the IT sector or developing online tools, those go to those volunteers. So we're constantly looking for people to be able to bring their skills and their expertise to their volunteering with 100 Women. It helps with retention. It helps with them having a really positive experience. And then we come together as a collective for the first time, and we're doing some QA to make sure that there's been no just typos or numbers missed in the scoring sheet, but we're working through a really thorough process to make sure that all of those expressions of interest have been reviewed fairly. And also too, we do talk about a bias. As humans, we all have bias. And I think most of the time, as long as we're aware of it, we're able to sort of take those glasses off and make sure that we're reading the applications and scoring them and looking at them in as neutral a way as possible. And we do some buddy checks with each other as well. And that helps to make sure that, as I said, there's been no just typos in the scoring sheet or any miscommunication in understanding what the proposal's about. Or sometimes when there's differing points of view, myself or one of the other leaders will come in and we'll have a broader discussion, so that basically by the end of that first workshop, we've got a hierarchy of all of those expressions of interest, and we'd be looking to take maybe up to 30 through to a second stage. And that's where we're looking at a more detailed application. We're really mindful of the burden of time and effort that we put on our not-for-profits, and we don't want to take a large number of organisations through to a second stage when, as I mentioned previously, we're only awarding maybe 5 grants.
Yeah, I wanted to underline that because I think that's a really important part of our process. Many of us who volunteer for 100 Women have, as you say, have volunteered in different organisations. I know my co-founder, Megan Anderson, and I, we had written many different grant applications for different not-for-profits that we had been involved in previous to 100 Women. So we came with that lens to the table that a lot of the time not-for-profits are doing extraordinary work for the amount of funding that they get. And we want to be respectful of that. So that's why we have that expression of interest before you go into the full application. And as you say, we're very careful about who we ask that full application from, because we want to be right that there's a good fit. You do a lot of work before that, even, answering questions from organizations. We run webinars to give people an idea of the types of projects that we fund, to ensure that there's that good fit before organisations are spending time and energy in applying for our grants. So just to finish off that process, so then an organisation then is invited to complete their full application. Then that goes back to our grants committee for a second look. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So in the second stage, there's a more detailed application. So the grants committee have the opportunity then to look at a much smaller number of applications. And that's also to where we engage with the organisation. When we're looking at over 150 first time round at the expressions of interest with a volunteer committee, there is no way that we can reach out to organisations and say, you know what, we weren't 100% sure what you meant there. So that's just the reality of being a volunteer organisation. But definitely in the second stage, our volunteers will set up a Teams meeting, or if they're fortunate enough to be here in Perth, we'll go and meet with the applicant and really understand that organisation and the proposal, and really go into detail and be able to flesh out what the proposal is about, and really understand who that organisation is, who they're working with, and what those planned outcomes are. We also will do independent referees. It's mandatory for our process that we speak to collaborators or other funders of people that have worked with that organisation previously, and then we come back. Again, the whole committee comes back together, and basically there is a presentation, quite a thorough presentation from the committee on the projects that they've looked at. The whole committee gets a briefing in the lead up to that. Then there's an in-person presentation, and collectively the whole room recommends the finalists that we put through to the members for voting. So it's a pretty tough afternoon. Normally a significant half-a-day workshop where we might be looking to take a list down by half. So these are the sort of the highest caliber projects. We've done the due diligence. We've really understood the projects. A couple of them, for any number of reasons, including that they might have sourced funding elsewhere, may step out of that process. But at this point, we do really have amazing projects on the table, and it can be quite tough to, as I said, work out which of the ones that we're taking through. And so it's really that discussion around the alignment with 100 Women, what the priorities are of the board, which reflects our members' priority. Also to the diversification of the proposals. When we put 9 or so proposals in front of our members for voting, our members want to see a breadth of causes and beneficiary groups, even geographic locations. So we make sure there's a really interesting mix of projects for them to be able to vote on. And we're also looking for that sustainability and that partnership around how can 100 Women support this organisation, or how can our members support this organisation, or look for a relationship and a partnership with 100 Women simply beyond providing a grant. So there's a lot that goes into those considerations, because the projects that miss out, it's not a reflection of the quality of the project. It's often just that you've got 20 odd amazing projects and you're trying to make sure that you're making a decision that is the best fit for 100 Women and its members, because they're the ones that have generously put the funds into the grants pool.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about with a robust grant-making process.
It's very robust. There's a lot of robust conversations, and it's really great because myself and some others have been doing it a really long time, but there's other members that are in the room who are only doing it, perhaps joining the committee for the first year, and they bring a freshness and a different perspective. And it really is, even in that small arena of 100 Women, it's still a very much a collective outcome and a collective discussion and decision, so that by the end of the afternoon, as the grants committee are putting the recommendations forward to the board that have been arrived at by consensus.
Yeah, absolutely. So then the next part of the process, once the board approves the final list that has been recommended by the grants committee, it then gets put forward to our members. And so we share those stories, those projects, the organisations, and online portals that are put together for our members to have a look through. And our members love getting to see that final, list of projects, whether they get funded or not. It really gives you a great idea of some fabulous organisations and projects that are happening here in Australia and then globally. We have different membership tiers to make sure that our membership is accessible to everyone, from $25 a month to $100 a month to beyond. But every member gets its own vote. And it's something that we've discussed many times throughout our organisation. Everybody gets the same vote regardless of what they contribute. Can you tell us why that's important to us?
Well, I think this goes back to some of those really early conversations around values and principles for 100 Women, and definitely accessibility was a key value for us. And also when we talk about that education piece and breaking down philanthropy and making philanthropy a concept that everyday people can step into and say, oh, you know what, yes, that's me. That means that it needs to be an amount that's affordable for, say, someone who's just starting out in their professional career perhaps, or coming out of university and working full-time for the first time and earning a wage. By having those tiers, that accessibility is there for everyone to be able to meet them at where they are in their life. And you know what too? Other women have talked about being able to, maybe they've actually been a $1,000 a year, so $100 a month contributor, and then they take time out to start their family and they're not earning as much. Obviously, this is very common. And so then they might step back their contribution to 100 Women for a few years and then be able to step it up again once they return to work. So it's really about understanding our members who are largely women, and even just their financial profile changes over the years. So it's about accessibility. It's about, if you're a member of 100 Women, you get to vote and you get to say, because at the end of the day, yes, different members give different amounts, but the grants pool is a collective grants pool, and we couldn't do what we do with any one or two member donations. We need the collective membership to work together to generously continuously year in, year out provide their donations, which fund the grants pool. So very important for everyone to have a vote. Personally, I love the feedback that comes when they say, Kristy, I can't decide. They're all too good.
That's where I say we need more money. We need more members.
We do need more money, but I also feel as though that is the pat on the back, and not just to me, by no means, to the entire team, the grant committee, when our members look at a list of 8 or 9 projects and they can't decide. And I think our voting is a little bit unique compared to some of the other giving circles across the country. So they do get time. They get really detailed briefings and information about all of the projects, and they get time to be able to look at that, digest that, really think about that, even have a discussion with their family or their friends before they do their voting online via our portal. And the other option that we give them with the voting is they actually get to rank every single project. Some other giving circles would say award 3 votes and you have to sort of pick your top 3, so to speak. Whereas here, the members get the benefit of looking at every single project and then having to sort of order those projects in a priority ranking. And again, I know people say sometimes that's really tough. It means that every project is getting looked at.
Exactly.
And it's about that awareness raising for the members to understand some of these high caliber projects that we've uncovered. And we know too, through our work over the last 13 years or so, members will find a project that resonates with them or aligns with their passion or their particular interest. And they'll continue to support 100 Women with their annual donation, but we have then put in front of them a project that they then go off and they might support themselves either via their own treasure or some volunteering, talent and time, volunteering in philanthropic endeavours. The education and the awareness that comes with that voting model, I think, is pretty special and unique to 100 Women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really contributes to a really meaningful voting process. And, I know a lot of our members who take it really seriously and, and sometimes, engage their families in that process as well. I suppose that's the research of collective giving. Going through that whole process makes you more aware and more considered with how you make the most difference with the money that you have. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. Kristy has spent the last 13 years asking one question on behalf of our members. How do we ensure that every single dollar our members contribute work as hard as it possibly can? More than 1,500 expressions of interest, hundreds of full applications reviewed. Every grant recommendation is made with the rigour of a professional and the conviction of someone who genuinely cares. Our grants process depends on formidable volunteers who volunteer long term. And so we want to recognise not only Kristy Rodwell, but also our long-term volunteers, Michelle Emmett, and our grants manager, Lorna Boys. When you join 100 Women, your contribution funds real change. A rigorous member-led process built by people with genuine expertise, driven by personal conviction, that puts your money where it will do the most good. 100 Women is a giving circle. Membership starts at $25 a month for bronze level, $50 for silver, and $100 for our gold level. And if you want to contribute more than that, there are options for that too. 100% of your donation goes directly to our grant making. Not a cent is taken to administration. And here's what matters the most. Every single member gets a vote. Whether you're a bronze member or a gold member, you have the exact same capacity to influence our grants. That's how a giving circle works. Since 2014, the process has funded 49 projects across 9 different countries, impacting over 39,500 women and girls. $1.9 million collectively granted, and 90% of those projects still exist today. If you're sitting there with the question, is it worth it? I think today's conversation will be the answer. Find out more and join us at 100women.org.au. The link is in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Community Kind. See you next time.